Story 1. My name is Josh. I'm 31 now, but what happened when I was 8 years old still makes my hands shake when I think about it. And the worst part is, my mom remembers it too, which means it wasn't just some nightmare I had as a kid. We lived in a split-level house in Oregon at the time. It was a quiet neighborhood, nothing unusual about it. My bedroom was on the second floor, right next to the bathroom. The hallway had this long mirror on the wall that you could see from my doorway if you left it open at night. I always slept with the door cracked because I didn't like complete darkness. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m., needing to use the bathroom. I remember sitting up in bed and looking toward my door. That's when I saw her. There was a woman standing in the hallway, perfectly still, facing the mirror. She had long black hair that went down past her shoulders, and she was wearing what looked like a white nightgown. I couldn't see her face because she was staring directly into the mirror with her back partially to me. I thought it was my mom at first, so I called out, "Mom." She didn't move, didn't turn around. Nothing. I said it again a little louder. "Mom, are you okay?" Still nothing. My stomach started to feel heavy. Something about the way she stood there felt wrong. Then, very slowly, her head started to turn toward me. Not her body, just her head. And I mean, it kept turning, way further than it should have been able to. I saw the side of her face in the dim light, and her skin looked gray, almost colorless. Her eyes were completely black. I screamed and dove under my blankets. I stayed there, shaking, until I heard my actual mom running down the hallway asking what was wrong. When she turned on the light and came into my room, I was crying so hard I could barely speak. She asked me what happened, and I told her about the woman in the hallway. My mom went pale. She sat down on my bed and didn't say anything for a long time. Then she told me that when she was putting laundry away earlier that evening, she had seen the same woman standing in that exact spot. She thought it was a trick of the light at first, but when she blinked, the woman was still there. My mom said she felt frozen, like she couldn't move, and then the figure just faded away. We moved out of that house 6 months later. My mom never wanted to talk about it after that night, but every once in a while when it comes up, she just shakes her head and says, "I saw her too." Story 2. When I was around 10 years old, my family took a road trip to visit my grandparents who lived about 4 hours away in rural Pennsylvania. We left late in the afternoon, and by the time we were halfway there, it was completely dark. My dad was driving, my mom was in the passenger seat, and I was in the back with my younger sister. She had fallen asleep, so I was just staring out the window, watching the trees pass by on this empty 2-lane road. At some point, I noticed headlights behind us. They stayed pretty far back, but they followed us for a while. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I realized we hadn't seen another car in like 20 minutes, and this one just kept the same distance. My dad must have noticed too, because he started driving a little faster. The car behind us sped up to match. Then my dad slowed down. The car behind us slowed down too. I felt my chest get tight. My mom asked my dad what he was doing, and he told her someone was following us. He turned off onto a side road that wasn't even on the GPS, just trying to lose them. The car followed. My dad made another turn, then another. The car stayed behind us the entire time, never getting closer, but never falling back either. Finally, my dad pulled into a gas station that had a single light on outside. He told us to stay in the car and lock the doors. He got out and walked toward the building, but it was closed. The car that had been following us pulled into the lot and just sat there at the far end with its headlights still on. My mom was on the phone with 911. I remember her voice shaking as she tried to explain where we were. My dad got back in the car, and we just sat there waiting. After maybe 5 minutes, the other car's headlights turned off. Then it slowly drove out of the lot and disappeared down the road. The police showed up about 10 minutes later and took a report, but they never found the car. Years later, when I was in college, I brought it up to my parents over dinner. My dad's face went serious. He told me that when he got out of the car that night, he could see someone sitting in the driver's seat of the other car, and the person was wearing a mask. Not like a ski mask, but something that looked homemade, with eye holes cut out. He said he didn't tell my mom or me at the time because he didn't want to scare us more than we already were. But he admitted he was terrified that night, and he's glad we never found out what that person wanted. Story 3. I grew up in a small town in Texas, and when I was about 7 years old, my mom worked night shifts at the hospital. My dad worked during the day, so there was about an hour every evening where I'd be home alone after school until he got back. My mom didn't like leaving me alone, but we didn't really have a choice. She always made sure I knew to keep the doors locked and not to answer for anyone. One evening, I was sitting in the living room watching cartoons when I heard a knock on the front door. I walked over and looked through the peephole. There was a man standing there. He was wearing a brown jacket and jeans, and he had a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I didn't recognize him. I didn't say anything. I just stood there watching through the peephole. He knocked again. Then he leaned closer to the door and said, "Hey, I know you're in there. I can hear the TV." My heart started pounding. I stepped back from the door. He knocked a third time, harder this time, and said, "Your mom asked me to check on you. She's worried. Can you open the door?" I knew my mom would never send a stranger to the house. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the phone. I didn't call 911 though. I was scared, but I wasn't sure if I was overreacting. Instead, I called my dad's cell phone. He answered right away, and I whispered that someone was at the door, saying my mom sent him. My dad told me to go to my room, lock the door, and stay on the phone with him. I did exactly that. I heard the man knock a few more times. Then, I heard him walk around to the side of the house. I could hear his footsteps on the gravel. My dad told me he was 5 minutes away and that he was calling the police. I sat in my room with the phone pressed to my ear, barely breathing. Then I heard the back door handle rattle. He was trying to get in. My bedroom was at the back of the house, and I could hear him right outside my window. I crawled under my bed and stayed there until I heard my dad's truck pull into the driveway. When my dad got there, the man was gone. The police came and checked the property, but they didn't find anyone. My mom came home early from her shift, and when I told her what the man said, her face went white. She hadn't sent anyone. She didn't even know anyone who fit that description. A few weeks later, my mom's coworker mentioned that there had been break-ins in the area targeting homes where kids were alone. The police suspected it was the same person, and they'd been using the excuse that a parent sent them. My mom still talks about how lucky we were that I didn't open that door. Key story 4. This one is embarrassing to admit, but it happened. And my dad confirmed every bit of it. So here it is. When I was around 9, I went through a phase where I was obsessed with exploring. I'd wander around our neighborhood, climb trees, check out construction sites, basically anything that seemed like an adventure. One Saturday afternoon, I was riding my bike near this old abandoned house at the edge of our street. The house had been empty for years. The windows were boarded up, the grass was overgrown, and there was a chain link fence around it with a no trespassing sign. Of course. That only made me more curious. I leaned my bike against the fence and squeezed through a gap near the gate. I walked around the side of the house, peeking through cracks in the boards, trying to see inside. That's when I heard a voice. It was a man's voice, and it came from inside the house. He said, "You shouldn't be here." I froze. I thought maybe it was a homeless person or a squatter. I backed away slowly, but then I heard footsteps inside, like someone was walking toward the front door. I ran. I grabbed my bike and pedaled home as fast as I could. When I got there, I didn't tell my parents what happened because I knew I'd get in trouble for trespassing. But that night at dinner, my dad mentioned that the police had been at the old house that afternoon. I asked why, trying to sound casual. He said a neighbor had called because they saw someone going in and out of the house. The police searched it and found evidence that someone had been living there. Sleeping bags, empty food containers, and a bunch of tools that looked like they'd been stolen from nearby garages. They also found something else, a list of names and addresses. Our address was on it. My dad said the police told him looked like someone had been watching houses in the area, possibly planning break-ins. I finally told my dad that I'd been there that afternoon and heard someone inside. His face went serious. He asked me exactly what the voice said, and when I told him, he just stared at me for a second. Then he said, "You're lucky you ran. They never caught whoever was staying in that house." My dad made me promise never to go near abandoned buildings again. I didn't. Story 5. When I was about 11, my mom and I moved into a new apartment after my parents' divorce. It was a small 2-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of an older building. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. The first few weeks were normal. We unpacked, got settled in, and everything seemed fine. But then I started noticing something weird. Every night, around the same time, maybe 1100 or midnight, I would hear footsteps in the hallway outside our apartment. They were slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone pacing back and forth. At first, I figured it was just a neighbor coming home late, but it happened every single night. And it would go on for like 20 or 30 minutes before stopping. One night, I was still awake when it started. I got up and walked to the front door to look through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but I could still hear the footsteps. They sounded like they were right outside our door, but there was no one there. I told my mom about it the next morning. She said she'd heard it too, but thought it was just the building settling or someone upstairs. I wasn't convinced. That night, I stayed up again and listened. The footsteps started right on time. This time, I quietly unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. The hallway was still empty, but the footsteps didn't stop. They kept going, pacing back and forth, and I swear they sounded like they were coming from right in front of me. I shut the door and locked it. My mom called the building manager the next day and asked if anyone else had complained about noise. He said no, but he'd check it out. A few days later, he came by and told us something that made my skin crawl. The apartment directly above ours had been vacant for over a year. The previous tenant, an older man, had died in the apartment. Natural causes. But the manager said other tenants had reported hearing footsteps up there too, even though no one lived there anymore. My mom didn't believe in ghosts, but she requested a transfer to a different apartment in the building. We moved 2 floors down a month later. I never heard the footsteps again. 2 story sips. I was 12 when this happened, and I was staying the night at my best friend Kyle's house. We were in his basement playing video games and eating junk food, the usual stuff. His parents were upstairs asleep, and we were supposed to be winding down, but we were still wide awake at like 200 a.m. At some point, Kyle paused the game and said he needed to grab something from the garage. The basement had a door that led directly to the garage, so he didn't have to go upstairs. He told me to wait there, and he'd be right back. He opened the door and stepped into the garage. I heard him flick the light switch, but the light didn't come on. He said, "The bulb must be out." Then he walked in anyway, leaving the door open behind him. I sat there on the couch, waiting. After maybe 30 seconds, I heard him say, "Hello." His voice sounded confused. Then I heard him say, "Who are you?" My stomach dropped. I got up and walked toward the door. I called out, "Kyle, you okay?" No response. I stepped into the doorway and looked into the dark garage. I could barely see anything, but I could make out Kyle's silhouette standing near the back corner. He wasn't moving. I called his name again. This time, he turned around and walked back toward me, really fast, almost running. He pushed past me into the basement and slammed the door shut behind him. His face was pale, and he was breathing hard. I asked him what happened. He said there was someone in the garage. A man standing in the corner, just staring at him. He said the man didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there. Kyle thought it was his dad at first, but when he asked who it was, the man didn't answer. Then Kyle realized his dad would have turned the light on and said something. We ran upstairs and woke up his parents. His dad grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat and went down to check the garage. We all followed him. When he opened the door and shined the flashlight around, there was no one there. But the side door to the garage, the one that led outside, was wide open. His dad always locked it at night. Kyle's dad called the police. They came and searched the property, but didn't find anyone. They said it was possible someone had broken in to steal tools or something and got scared off when Kyle walked in. But here's the part that still freaks me out. A few days later, Kyle's mom was going through some old mail that had piled up, and she found a note that had been slipped under their front door. It wasn't dated, and it was handwritten in messy print. All it said was, "I was in the garage." Kyle's parents never figured out who left it. We stopped having sleepovers at his house after that. To story 7. When I was around 8 years old, my family took a camping trip to a national park in Colorado. We rented a spot at a campground that had a fire pit, a picnic table, and not much else. It was pretty isolated, just trees and trails and a few other campsites scattered around. The first couple of days were great. We hiked, roasted marshmallows, the whole deal. But on the third night, something happened that I still can't explain. We were sitting around the campfire after dinner. It was getting dark, and my dad was telling some dumb ghost story to try and scare me and my older brother. We were laughing and messing around when my mom suddenly said, "Shh, did you hear that?" We all went quiet. At first, I didn't hear anything. But then I did. It was whistling, not like a bird or the wind. It was a tune, like someone whistling a melody. And it was coming from the woods behind our campsite. My dad stood up and grabbed the flashlight. He shined it toward the trees, but we couldn't see anything. The whistling stopped. My mom told us to stay close to the fire, and my dad walked a few steps toward the tree line. He called out, "Hello? Anyone out there?" No answer. Then the whistling started again, but this time it was coming from a different direction, off to the side. My dad swung the flashlight around, but still nothing. The whistling moved again. It was like whoever was doing it was circling around us. My brother and I were getting scared. My mom told my dad to come back to the fire. He did, and we all just sat there listening. The whistling kept going for maybe another minute, and then it stopped completely. The woods went silent. No crickets, no rustling, nothing. My dad decided we should pack up and leave first thing in the morning. None of us slept much that night. We kept hearing noises outside the tent, like footsteps crunching on leaves. But every time my dad looked outside with the flashlight, there was nothing there. The next morning, when we were packing up the car, my mom found something on the picnic table that hadn't been there the night before. It was a small pile of sticks arranged in a weird pattern, almost like a symbol. My dad knocked it off the table and told us not to touch it. We left and didn't come back. Years later, I mentioned the trip to my mom, and she told me that she and my dad had talked to the park ranger on the way out. The ranger said they'd had reports of someone harassing campers in that area, whistling and leaving strange objects around campsites. but they'd never been able to catch whoever it was. My mom said the ranger recommended we file a report, but my dad didn't want to deal with it. He just wanted to get us out of there. I don't blame him.